You know, sometimes love feels like sunlight, warm, endless, certain. And then one day it's like the clouds roll in and you're standing in the same place, but the light feels different, softer, fainter, not gone, just fading. But the strange, beautiful thing about love is that even when it fades, the memories don't. They become the echo of who we were, the anchor to who we still are. And maybe that's what keeps us alive when everything else starts to slip away. Today, I want to talk about what happens when love fades but memories stay, and why that isn't the end of something but the beginning of understanding ourselves. You know, people often think that when love fades, it's a sign something went wrong, like someone failed, like there's a villain and a victim, but that's not always how it works. Sometimes love fades not because it wasn't strong enough, but because we changed, because growth has this quiet way of rearranging the furniture inside us. The things that once fit perfectly start to feel different. And that's not a tragedy. It's life doing what life does, moving us forward, even when our hearts want to stay still. When two people fall in love, it's like a song. There's rhythm, harmony, this beautiful sense of belonging in the same melody. But as time passes, people grow in their dreams, their fears, their perspectives. And sometimes that rhythm shifts. One person begins to dance to a new beat, while the other is still trying to follow the old tune. And you start to feel that space, that quiet distance that wasn't there before. It's not betrayal, it's evolution. We're all growing, and growth isn't always synchronized. I once met someone who said, "We stopped loving each other at the same time, but we didn't realize it until years later." That stayed with me, because it wasn't bitterness in her voice, it was peace. She had understood that love didn't fail them. It completed its purpose. It gave them what they needed for that chapter of their lives. And when it was time to move on, the love didn't die. It simply became something else: gratitude, respect, memory. The truth is, growth changes the way we love. When you're young, love feels like fire, wild, passionate, consuming. You want to hold it, protect it, never let it go. But as you grow older, love becomes more like light, softer, steadier, something that illuminates rather than burns. The love you gave at 20 isn't the same love you give at 40. You understand that love isn't about possession. It's about presence. It's not about needing someone to fill your gaps, but about sharing the journey with someone who's also learning who they are. There's this beautiful paradox. When we grow, we become more ourselves, but sometimes that means becoming less aligned with the person we once loved, and that can hurt. It feels like losing a part of yourself, but maybe that's the point. To realize that love's fading doesn't erase what was real. It simply means you've stepped into a new season. The tree doesn't mourn the leaves it loses in autumn. It knows that letting go makes space for new life to grow in spring. Think about the people you've loved and lost. Think about how each one changed you, taught you patience, forgiveness, maybe even the strength to be alone. Every faded love leaves fingerprints on your soul. And one day you'll look back and realize that all those faded moments, all those quiet goodbyes, built the person you became. Love didn't disappear. It transformed into wisdom. So maybe the question isn't why love fades. Maybe it's what it leaves behind when it does. Because in every fading there's a gift. The lesson of impermanence. The understanding that nothing stays the same, and that's okay. The courage to let people grow, even if that means growing apart. And maybe that's the most human thing we can do. To love fully, knowing it might fade, and to let it go with grace when it does. To say thank you for the part of the journey we shared, and keep walking, knowing that the love you once had doesn't vanish. It just becomes part of who you are now. Love fades, yes, but growth keeps you alive. You know, there's something sacred about memories. They're like small, flickering lights that survive long after the fire has gone out. When love fades, people often tell you to move on, to forget, to erase everything that reminds you of what once was. But I don't think forgetting is the answer. Forgetting doesn't heal you. It just buries the truth. Because the truth is, those memories are proof that it was real. They're the evidence that, for a moment in time, something beautiful existed between two people, something worth feeling deeply for. And that, to me, is sacred. When you fall in love, your world expands. Every moment feels brighter, sharper, more alive. You start remembering the smallest details, the sound of their laugh, the way their hand fit perfectly into yours, how sunlight hit their hair in the morning. You don't plan to remember these things, they just etch themselves into your mind. Scientists say our brains hold on to emotionally intense moments because those experiences trigger both emotion and memory in a way that ordinary days don't. That's why heartbreak hurts so much. Because love literally rewires your brain. It becomes part of your chemistry. And when it fades, the body still remembers, even when the mind tries to forget. But here's the thing. Those memories aren't punishment. They're reminders that you were capable of deep feeling. They prove you were alive in a moment that mattered. Even if that moment is gone, the impact remains. You can close your eyes and still feel the echo of their voice, the warmth of their presence. It's like a photograph your heart refuses to delete. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe those memories are your way of saying, this happened. I lived this. I love this. I once knew a man who carried an old photograph in his wallet. It was worn and faded, the edges frayed from years of unfolding. It was a picture of his wife, who had passed away decades earlier. Someone once asked him why he kept it, and he said, because when I look at it, I remember the sound of her laughter, the smell of her cooking, and the way she used to hum when she was nervous. I don't want to forget that I was loved like that. He wasn't holding on to the past, he was honoring it. That's what memories do. They allow us to honor what once gave us life. In a world that's obsessed with moving forward, we forget the beauty of standing still for a moment and remembering. We treat nostalgia like it's a weakness, but it's not. It's a form of gratitude. Remembering someone or something you once loved isn't a sign you're stuck. It's a sign that your heart still knows how to recognize meaning. The past doesn't disappear. It becomes the soil from which your future grows. Think about the songs that suddenly stop you in your tracks. You're driving or walking through a store and a melody comes on, and suddenly you're somewhere else. You're back in that car with them, that night under the stars, that kitchen full of laughter, and it hurts for a second, that ache, that longing, but beneath it there's something strangely comforting because you realize that love leaves traces that even time can't wash away. The moment might be gone, but the feeling, the essence stays with you. That's how you know it was real. Some people fear memories because they think they keep you chained to the past. But that's not true. Memories don't chain you, they ground you. They remind you where you've been, what you've felt, and how far you've come. They're markers of the life you've lived. You can't build a future without understanding the roads that brought you here. There's a woman I once met who told me that after her husband left, she boxed up everything that reminded her of him. The photos, the letters, the souvenirs from their trips. She thought that by removing the evidence, she could erase the pain. But months later, she said something shifted. She missed not him, but the memories, the good ones, the laughter, the quiet dinners, the moments that made her feel seen. One day she opened the box again, not to cry, but to smile. I realized, she said, that I wasn't mourning him anymore. I was honoring who I was when I was with him, the version of me that loved without fear. That's what memories do when you stop fighting them. They heal you. Sometimes when people walk away, it's easy to tell yourself that it was never real, that maybe you imagined the connection or that love was only temporary. But memories are the counter-argument to that voice. You can't fake the feeling of someone's hand trembling when they first told you they loved you. You can't rewrite the way your heart beat faster when you saw them waiting for you across the room. Those things happened, they were real, and real things leave traces that time can't erase. Love doesn't always end in a dramatic goodbye. Sometimes it fades quietly, like the sun setting over the ocean. Slow, inevitable, beautiful in its own way. But when it does, the memories remain like stars. They don't disappear with the light, they just shine differently. And when you look back, you realize they're still guiding you, reminding you of who you were and what you're capable of feeling again. People often say, don't live in the past. But maybe the past isn't a place to live. Maybe it's a place to visit, to gather strength, to remember what made you human. Every memory, even the painful ones, carries a piece of truth about who you are. They teach you how to love better next time, how to recognize red flags, how to appreciate the little things you once took for granted. And maybe that's the real gift of memory. It turns heartbreak into wisdom. It reminds you that love doesn't have to last forever to be meaningful, that even if it ended, it mattered. You can carry those memories like lanterns, not to light up the path behind you, but to illuminate where you're going next. So don't be afraid of the past. Don't curse the songs that make you cry or the places that remind you of what you lost. Let them remind you that you once had the courage to open your heart, that you took the risk, that you loved deeply and honestly in a world that so often tells us not to, because that's the bravest thing a person can do, to love knowing it might fade and to remember it anyway. Memories aren't ghosts meant to haunt you. They're proof that you lived something true, something worth carrying forward. They're the echoes of love that once was, and the whispers that tell you, even in the silence, that it was real. And if you can hold on to that truth, then maybe love never really leaves. It just changes form. It becomes the quiet strength that carries you through the next chapter. You know, letting go is one of those things that sounds simple when you say it out loud, but when you're standing in the middle of it, it feels impossible. People tell you to move on, to forget, to just let go, as if the heart listens to logic. But the truth is, letting go doesn't mean you erase what happened. It doesn't mean pretending it never mattered or that it didn't hurt. Letting go means honoring what once was, holding it in your heart without letting it hold you down. When you love someone deeply, you build a world around them. Every laugh, every touch, every late-night conversation becomes a piece of that world. And when that love ends, it feels like the whole thing crumbles. But what if I told you it doesn't? What if the world you built doesn't disappear? It just changes shape. It becomes a memory, a lesson, a quiet echo that follows you, reminding you that you once had something beautiful. That's what honoring looks like, acknowledging what was real without needing it to still be here. I think the hardest part about letting go is the silence that follows. You get used to their voice, their messages, their presence. You get used to having them in your orbit, and then one day it's just you. The quiet is louder than anything, but in that silence, something sacred begins to happen. You start to hear your own voice again. You start remembering who you were before the world revolved around someone else. That's not forgetting. That's returning. It's honoring the part of you that loved and the part of you that survived the loss. There's a story about an old man who used to visit the same park bench every morning. People thought he was waiting for someone, but one day someone asked him why he always came alone. He said, "I used to sit here with the love of my life every day. She's gone now, but I come here to remember her laughter, her stories. This is how I still talk to her." He wasn't clinging to the past. He was honoring it. He understood that love doesn't disappear when people do. It just finds a quieter way to exist. You see, there's a difference between holding on and honoring. Holding on is trying to relive the same story again and again, hoping that somehow the ending will change. Honoring is recognizing that the story ended, but still being grateful it was written at all. It's lighting a candle instead of keeping a fire that burns you. It's saying, "Thank you for what you gave me," and then walking forward with that warmth still inside you. A friend once told me that when her mother passed away, she couldn't bring herself to clear her room for months. Every time she tried, it felt like she was erasing her. But one day she realized her mother wouldn't have wanted her to live inside that grief forever. So instead of throwing things away, she chose a few items, a necklace, a book, a photo, and created a small altar of remembrance. She said it changed everything. "I didn't lose her," she told me. "I just learned how to carry her differently." That's what letting go really is. Carrying someone differently, not in your hands, where they can slip away, but in your heart, where they stay safe. Sometimes we confuse moving on with betrayal. We think that by smiling again, by laughing, by loving someone new, we're disrespecting what came before. But that's not true. You don't dishonor love by living. You honor it by continuing. Every joy you feel after heartbreak is a tribute to the love that once showed you how to feel deeply. Letting go doesn't erase the love, it amplifies it. It gives it space to evolve from pain into peace. There's a point in healing where you stop wishing for what was and start appreciating what is. You realize that you can remember someone fondly without needing to be where they are. You can love them quietly from a distance without expectation. Love doesn't need ownership to be real. Sometimes love's purest form is release, and it's okay to miss them. It's okay to wake up some mornings and feel that ache again. Healing isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. You circle back sometimes, you revisit memories, you feel old wounds sting, but every time you do, you come back a little stronger, a little clearer. a little more at peace. Because each time you're reminded that pain doesn't mean you're broken, it means you cared. There's beauty in honoring something that once gave your life meaning, whether it was a relationship, a friendship, or even a dream that didn't work out. You can honor it by remembering what it taught you. The laughter, the lessons, the moments of kindness. You can honor it by being the person it helped you become. The best way to keep something alive isn't to cling to it. It's to embody what it gave you. I once met a musician who said that every song he wrote after his heartbreak was a conversation with the person he lost. I'm not trying to get her back, he said. I'm trying to make sure I never forget what she taught me about love. He turned pain into melody. That's what honoring does. It transforms loss into creation. It takes something that could destroy you and turns it into something that makes you more human. Letting go isn't about cutting ties to the past. It's about weaving it into your story in a way that gives you strength instead of sorrow. It's about looking back without bitterness, remembering without breaking, and loving without holding on. You don't need to delete pictures or burn letters to move forward. You just need to let the meaning of them evolve. What once hurt can become what now heals. Maybe that's what growing up really is. Learning that not everything lasts forever, and that's okay. The sunset doesn't mourn the day it ends. It just trusts that the light will return in a new form. Love is like that too. It changes shape, but it never truly dies. It moves through us, becomes part of our stories, and leaves traces of its warmth wherever it's been. So when you think about letting go, don't see it as losing something, see it as giving thanks. For the laughter, for the tears, for the lessons, for the moments when your heart beat just a little faster. Those moments mattered. They still do. You're allowed to carry them with you, not as a weight, but as a reminder that you lived fully, that you opened your heart, that you were brave enough to love. Letting go doesn't mean erasing what was real. It means honoring it so deeply that it can rest, and so can you. It means saying goodbye without bitterness, remembering without pain, and loving without fear. Because love, in its truest form, doesn't vanish. It transforms. And sometimes, the most powerful act of love you can give is to release it and let it become something that quietly lives inside you forever. You know, memories have this strange way of living inside us. They linger like shadows that follow the light, always close, sometimes quiet, sometimes heavy. When we lose someone or when love fades, those memories can feel like chains. They can trap us in a loop, replaying what was, what could have been, what we wish we could change. But maybe memories were never meant to be cages. Maybe they were always meant to be bridges, something that connects us from who we were to who we're becoming. When you think about it, memory is one of the most human things we have. It's how we make sense of time, of love, of loss. It's how we hold on to people who can't stay, and how we remind ourselves that what we felt was real. But we often forget that memory isn't just about the past. It's about what we carry forward. It's the part of love that doesn't vanish. You might revisit an old journal, a photograph, or a message. You might feel that familiar ache in your chest. But if you sit with it long enough, you'll see that the person who created that memory isn't the same person standing here now. You've grown, you've survived, the memory doesn't own you anymore. It's part of your foundation. Think about how bridges are built from strong, steady materials that can hold weight in weather storms. That's what your memories are made of. The strength of every laugh, every tear, every goodbye you thought you wouldn't survive. Those moments are the beams that hold up who you are today. You're not supposed to live under the bridge, trapped in what was. You're supposed to walk across it, carrying the lessons, leaving behind the pain, and stepping into something new. There's beauty in the fact that the human heart remembers, because without memory, we wouldn't have meaning. We wouldn't know joy or nostalgia or love at all. Memory is how we stay connected to people who've left us. It's how we honor the moments that shaped us. You don't have to shut the door on your past to live in the present. You just have to learn how to walk with it side by side. And yes, sometimes you'll stumble. You'll find yourself back in that old emotional space, missing what once was, longing for something you can't touch anymore. But instead of seeing it as a setback, see it as a reminder that healing isn't forgetting. It's integrating. Every time you revisit that place, it hurts a little less. You learn something new. You cross a little farther on that bridge. You see, memories aren't here to trap you in sorrow. They're here to remind you that even after endings, there's continuity. That love, in some quiet way, keeps moving with you when you laugh at something they used to say, when you remember their advice in a hard moment, when you feel their presence in silence. That's the bridge working. That's love reminding you it still exists, just differently now. So maybe it's not about letting go of memories. Maybe it's about letting them evolve. Maybe it's about seeing them not as ghosts haunting you, but as companions walking beside you. The people we lose, the moments we outgrow, they don't vanish. They become part of the map that leads us home to ourselves. Memories are bridges built out of emotion, shaped by time and held together by meaning. They don't ask you to live in the past. They ask you to keep walking toward the future with a softer heart, to remember without drowning, to feel without breaking, to carry the past not as a burden, but as proof that you've lived, that you've loved, that you've endured. And maybe one day, when the ache has softened, you'll look back and smile. Not because you've forgotten, but because you finally understand. The memory didn't cage you, it carried you, it led you to this moment right here, where you can stand in peace and whisper to yourself, I made it across. When love begins to fade, there's this quiet kind of ache that settles in. It's not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just stillness, a pause between two people who once spoke in laughter and heartbeats. The silences get longer, the words feel thinner, and you start to sense it, that space growing between what you used to be and what you've become. It's painful realizing that parts of you got lost in trying to hold something together, but that pain is clarity. It's life handing you a mirror and saying, look, this is who you are now. And if you're brave enough to keep looking, you start to see beauty there, not the kind that comes from being loved, but the kind that comes from learning to love yourself again. I once knew someone who said that when their long relationship ended, they felt like a house after the furniture had been moved out. Hollow, echoing, strange. They didn't recognize their own space anymore. But as time passed, they started to fill that house again. Not with someone else, but with their own laughter, their own music, their own peace. It was the first time I ever felt at home with myself, they told me. Sometimes that's what heartbreak does. It empties you just enough so you can start rebuilding from truth. When love fades, you begin to see the parts of yourself you ignored while loving someone else. You start remembering your old dreams, the ones you shelved because there wasn't time or space for them. You start noticing what actually makes you feel alive. The sound of rain, the taste of your favorite food, the peace of being alone without feeling lonely. It's like you've been underwater for years, and finally you're coming up for air. It hurts at first, that sharp inhale, but then slowly it starts to feel like freedom. We live in a world that tells us our value is tied to being loved, to being chosen. But when love fades, and you're standing there on your own, you start to understand that your worth was never dependent on someone else's gaze. You start to find it in the small, quiet moments, in your resilience, in your kindness, in your ability to keep going even when the heart feels tired. You start to see that you don't need to be someone's everything to be whole. You already were. You just forgot for a while. There's this moment after heartbreak when everything feels empty. The mornings are too quiet. The nights are too long. But if you sit with that emptiness, if you let it breathe, instead of trying to fill it right away, something beautiful starts to grow there. Self-awareness, strength, a deeper understanding of what love actually means. Not just loving others, but loving yourself enough to walk away when something no longer nourishes you. You realize that love isn't supposed to cost you your sense of self. It's supposed to illuminate it. A friend once told me that after her marriage ended, she took herself on a trip, alone, for the first time in her life. She said it was terrifying at first, sitting in restaurants by herself, waking up in silence. But one morning, she looked out at the sunrise, coffee in hand, and thought, I'm okay. I'm really okay. That moment didn't erase her pain, but it reminded her that she could stand on her own. And that realization, that she was enough, became the foundation of who she was going forward. That's what happens when love fades. It gives you back to yourself. It's easy to confuse love fading with failure, to think you did something wrong, that if you'd been better, smarter, kinder, maybe it wouldn't have slipped away. But love isn't a test you pass or fail. It's an experience, one that changes shape as you grow. Sometimes it lasts a lifetime, sometimes it doesn't. And when it ends, it's not always because of fault. It's because people evolve. And sometimes they grow in different directions. That doesn't make the love any less real. It just means its purpose was fulfilled. Maybe that love came to teach you something about patience, about empathy, about boundaries, about yourself. And when its lesson is done, it leaves quietly, making space for who you're meant to become next. You start noticing that the world is still full, even when your heart feels empty. You see beauty in the smallest things, a child laughing, a dog running through the park, the way the city lights shimmer at night. Life keeps whispering, "You're still here. Keep going." And one day you realize that you're not just surviving anymore. You're living. You're not looking back as often. You're not searching for the reflection of love in every stranger's eyes. You're beginning to recognize it within yourself. That's the strange gift of love fading. It breaks you open, but not to destroy you. And that kind of love, the kind born from self-understanding, is quieter, steadier, and infinitely more real. So when love fades, don't see it as an ending. See it as an unveiling, because underneath all the hurt, all the questions, all the letting go, there's you, just you. And maybe that's where the real love story begins. The one where you finally see yourself clearly and realize that you were enough all along. So when love starts to fade, don't fight it, don't curse it, don't run from it, sit with it, thank it. And remember, the fading light doesn't mean the sun is gone. It just means it's time for a different kind of glow, because memories, they don't just keep you alive, they remind you why you're alive. The part that still speaks to us in the quiet moments when we think we're alone. I once met someone who told me that after losing the person they loved, they stopped visiting their favorite places. The beach they used to walk together, the coffee shop with the window seat, the movie theater where they laughed too loud. It hurt too much, they said. Every place reminded me of them. But months later, they went back, not to chase the past, but to reclaim those places. They said, "This time, I didn't see what I lost. I saw what we shared. I felt grateful instead of broken." That's what it means when memories become a bridge. They no longer trap you in what's gone. They help you cross into gratitude, into peace. It's easy to see memories as reminders of pain. You hear a song and suddenly your chest tightens. You pass a street corner and your eyes sting with tears. But those moments aren't punishments, they're invitations, they're life's way of whispering. Look how deeply you felt, look how alive you were. The ache means something beautiful once existed. And even though it's gone, the memory of it can still make you stronger. Sometimes the past can pull at you like gravity. You try to move forward, but something inside keeps looking back. It's like trying to walk with your eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. You can't help but wonder, could I have done more? Could I have loved better? But the truth is, the past isn't asking you to fix it. It's asking you to understand it, to take the lessons it gave you and carry them gently into your next chapter. That's how you turn memory into a bridge, by walking across it with forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't always about others. Often it's about forgiving yourself, for staying too long, for leaving too soon, for not knowing what you know now. We all make choices we wish we could change. But if you can look back and still find compassion for the person you were, then those memories stop being cages. They become teachers. They remind you that you were doing your best with what you had. And that's enough. There was this man I once spoke to who carried a lot of guilt after his father passed. They hadn't spoken in years, and he said he'd give anything to have one more conversation. He told me he replayed their last argument over and over, torturing himself with what he didn't say. But eventually he started writing letters to his father, letters he'd never send. He said it helped him heal. It helped him bridge the silence that had lived between them. He didn't erase the memory, he rewrote its meaning. That's what happens when you stop running from the past and start walking with it instead. Every memory has two sides, the pain of what's gone and the beauty of what was. When we focus only on the pain, we get stuck. But when we look for the beauty, something opens up inside us. We start to realize that even though love changes form, it doesn't disappear. It stays quietly in the lessons, in the laughter, in the way we now treat others. Every time we show kindness, patience, or empathy that we once learned through heartbreak, that's the memory working as a bridge. Sometimes you have to go back to move forward, not to dwell, but to remember how far you've come. It hurts, not just because love is slipping away, but because it feels like you're losing a part of yourself with it. But maybe that's the beginning of something deeper. Because when love fades, that's often when you start to truly see yourself. It's strange how love can feel like a mirror. When you're in it, you see yourself reflected in someone else's eyes. Their approval, their warmth, their attention. It all shapes the way you understand who you are. You start to define yourself by the way they see you. But when that reflection disappears, when the mirror cracks, there is a moment of panic. Who am I without this person? Who am I when no one is looking at me that way anymore? And in that emptiness, in that uncertainty, you finally begin to meet yourself. Not the version shaped by someone else's love, but the one that's been waiting quietly beneath it all along. There's a quiet truth about fading love. It strips away illusion. You start to see what was real and what was just comfort. You see the ways you changed to keep the peace, the ways you shrank to fit into someone else's story. It breaks you open to let light in, to help you see what you couldn't when you were too busy holding on. It shows you your strength, your capacity for healing, your courage to face the unknown. And in that space, between what was and what will be, you start to understand what real love is. It's not dependency, it's not completion, it's freedom, it's truth, it's the ability to stand alone and still feel whole. When love fades, it's easy to focus on what you've lost, but if you look closely, you'll see what you've gained: perspective, resilience, a deeper sense of self. You see the parts of you that love didn't take away, the parts that were always yours. You begin to see yourself not as someone who was left behind, but as someone who's finally arrived. And maybe when you've spent enough time with yourself, when you've learned to love your own company, when you've made peace with your scars, love will find you again, but this time it'll be different. It won't be about filling a void. It'll be about sharing fullness. You'll love not because you need someone to complete you, but because you want someone to walk beside you.